I think I need 3 arms because I need one to hold the microphone, one to hold the clicker, and the other to flip my pages. But we'll work with that. First of all, she asked who in general read books. Specifically, who read The Hobbit or watched the movie? Okay, who read or watched the movie for the Lord of the Rings series? Okay, now here's the trick one. Who here has read or ever even heard of the Silmarillion? Oh, a lot less. Okay. I believe that this stuff that we're talking about right now is actually great literature. I believe that it's right up there with the Iliad and the Odyssey and the Aeneid, a Divine Comedy, Paradise Lost, and I don't think I'm the only one who thinks that way, because in the year 2000 they had some polls. First of all, it was just England. What were the 10 best books of the 20th century? J.R. Tolkien's Lord of the Rings, number 1. So they expanded it because none of the experts liked that answer. So they had it all of North America and Europe. J.R. Tolkien, number 1. So then they did a worldwide poll. J.R. Tolkien, number 1. So he has won lots and lots of different polls. He is the one who did it all. So for some reason, I do not agree with the critics, because even though every person always says that Tolkien's works are number 1, the critics hate his works. If you go to the professionals, they would say, no, he's a horrible thing. We don't like what he has to say. So the experts often talk it down. And this is because they're coming at it from what's called philosophically the postmodern critique. In the postmodern critique, that means they do not like heroes. They will do all they can to, if you ever present a hero, the goal, rather than looking at the heroic element of their life to raise us up and inspire us, they will look at the bad part of the hero's life to bring them down to our level. And I've never really liked that. Matter of fact, I think we just saw that 2 weeks ago. The president of the University of Virginia quoted Thomas Jefferson. Thomas Jefferson was one of the founders of the University of Virginia. So, of course, you quote Thomas Jefferson. 400 students and faculty wrote a letter in protest, how dare you quote Thomas Jefferson because he owned slaves. Oh, so the goal was to bring him down rather than to take what good he did and inspire us. But that's across the board. Because J.R. Tolkien produces heroes in his work, good, strong heroes, the critics tend not to like him. So right off the bat, I'm going to disagree with them because I want to be inspired by heroism rather than having the heroes brought down into the mud where I probably am. Okay, why read these books and watch these movies? First, they're great stories. They are entertaining, they're lots of fun, there's a lot of action, there's some romance involved, and even benefit for us, there are lots of Catholic themes that I would like to go into. So here's what I'm hoping to do tonight. First of all, because so many of you have not read all the books, and may not be familiar, I want to do a small overview of the world of Tolkien so that you'll understand where I'm beginning. Immediately after that, I will look at Tolkien himself, because if you don't understand Tolkien, you're not going to understand his Catholic themes. Thirdly, I am then going to walk through theme by theme and use some examples from the books of why those themes are important. So with that in mind, whenever I write about anything online, I have to say this. Spoiler alert, I'm going to talk about Tolkien. I'm going to talk about the story. So if you haven't heard it, you'll learn about it tonight. So, with that in mind, into the world of Tolkien itself. I need to begin with this instruction. First of all, I'm going to use The Hobbit. The Hobbit was written for his kids. He said, I want my children to grow up with virtue, and I want them to know bravery, and I want them to learn that well. So he wrote this as a sort of a something for him to read to his kids. And when they found out this, somebody else, they read it, like, this is fascinating, you have to publish this. He said, why? It's just a kid's book for my kids. He published it, became wonderfully popular, so then people demanded a sequel, wrote Lord of the Rings in the 1950s, but his heart and soul was in the Silmarillion, which most people don't even know about, but for him was the core of everything that he wrote was in that. And that wasn't published till even after his death in 1972. So, we can now, you're probably wondering why we have a script of an old chant piece. That's because if we're going to look at the Tolkien world, we have to look at his creation story. In the Silmarillion, his creation story, there's one God in eternity. His name is Eru Ilúvatar. Eru Ilúvatar created from nothing, and he created spiritual beings first that he called the Ainur. So Eru then began a theme of a song and began to sing, and all of the spiritual beings began to sing with him, and he began to sing creation into existence. By the way, I'm not sure if you noticed that text, it's the Christmas chant, so I purposely chose one with Christmas on it, which is the beginning of the recreation of humanity at the birth of Christ. So these spiritual beings sang, but there was one spiritual being. By the way, spiritual beings in Catholic theology are called angels, just so you know. So these angels, these spiritual beings, one of them named Melkor decided to sing his own song, and he caused discord into the music. So Eru began a second theme of song and music. And Melkor again jumped in with discord and caused disharmony in the music. And then one last theme, he began to sing the beauty of creation into existence. Melkor jumped in with his own theme, and then that music, boom, became creation. Where God spoke creation, Eru Ilúvatar sang creation. Music became creation. The world that he created was called Arda, and Melkor, this evil angel, I've seen some themes here, this evil angel then decided to claim Arda for himself, but he actually stopped being a spiritual being and entered into the creation itself, taking on a physical form. To save creation, a whole other bunch of Ainur decided to enter into creation himself. The powerful ones were called Valar, and the weaker ones were called the Maiar. So this is all part of his creation story. And so then at the very center of his creation, Eru Ilúvatar stuck in the secret fire, a creative force at the center of his universe. So basically, what all these stories are is this wonderful spiritual struggle between good versus evil, where the discord entered into the harmony of the music, and it's all being taken place on all of these angels who take physical form in the world. Melkor is their equivalent of Satan. Now remember, I mentioned the Maiar are also these spiritual beings who took physical form. Melkor corrupted some of those Maiar, and they became evil. Satan did that. We call them devils. Devils are nothing but fallen angels. So we have the same thing here. An example of a Maiar who became evil is in the books. There was a giant fiery being called a Balrog. That was a Maiar, a spiritual being created at the very beginning, created good, became evil, and corrupted. So basically, when you get to that part of the story where we meet the Balrog, that's the devil. Now, then after after that, there was the creation of the different races. Elves came first, then came human. These two different races were connected to Eru Iluvatar and not to any of the Valar. So the Creator God created them specially. The elves were connected directly to the world. That's why they were all concerned about nature. That's why they didn't age. That's why they didn't die of disease. They were connected to the world. And if they did die, the elves could actually come back to life because they were connected to the world. The humans were created next. Humans, here's the bizarre thing. It says that humans were given the gift of death. Think about it, the gift of death. That means since they had to do everything in their short lifespan, the humans were the doers of the world. So if you ever read the stories, like, why are the elves just sitting there? Why don't they ever do anything? They just sit and sing and sing and sing and sing. They don't do anything. The people, humans, do something. But they're given the gift of death because they were created for Eru Iluvatar himself, to be brought into his divine life. But they only saw it as, oh no, we're going to die of old age someday. And they never saw it as a gift. Okay. Now we enter into the quick ages. First, there was the first age. And the first age was mostly a war against Melkor. Melkor is the Ainur, the angel who became human. He is the equivalent of Satan. And the entire first part of the first age is basically the book of Revelation, the battle between the angels. So it's very similar to that. It's between the Valar and Melkor. And Melkor's chief servant was Sauron, who is the main evil character in the next two ages. So there we have Satan. That's what the story is about. Now, in the middle of all this was a love story between a human warrior named Beren and the person he loved so much, Luthien. She was an elven maiden. She even gave up her immortality to be with him. It was one of the greatest love stories in all of Tolkien. It was central to his world. And they had to save each other from Melkor. And then there was this whole thing about Cimmerals, which are these jewels. And they saved one of them. So at the end of the first age, Melkor is defeated and exiled from the world into the void. Okay, I just did 300 pages in that one paragraph. After that, we move into the second age. In the second age is a story about humans in Numenor. The Numenorians had great virtue and courage, and they were successful, but then they became so successful that they began to get corrupt. They began to let evil sort of soak into their world, and they didn't care. You know how in the Old Testament they would know God, and then get lazy, and turn away from God, and then collapse, and then they would know God, well, that was the Numenorians. They were getting lazy, and they began to collapse. So Sauron came in. Remember, that was the second in charge to Melkor. Now that Melkor's gone, Sauron is top evil guy. And he played on their desire to be immortal, because they were human. So, does that sound like Adam and Eve? Their desire to be like God? And so he played on that. Some of the Numenorians escaped to Middle-earth, but the rest sailed to attack the Valar, to try to take immortality by force. And they were all destroyed. So then the Numenorians in Middle-earth formed the kingdom of Gondor, and that's when Sauron snuck into the world and created the Rings of Power. He was being portrayed as a good person, so they made 9 rings for men, human beings, 7 for dwarves, and 3 for the elves. And once they were all sort of doled out, he created 1 ring in secret. And that ring would be the one that would control all the other rings. Matter of fact, that ring was an evil ring, and it had written on it, 1 ring to rule them all, 1 ring to find them, 1 ring to bring them all, and into darkness bind them. It was part of a much larger poem, but it's basically, there's one ring that will control all the others, and through that he was going to control the world. The one ring, what it did is it enhanced every desire you had, gave you the power to achieve that desire, and in the midst of that would corrupt your soul and addict you to the very desires that you wanted, and it also happened to make you invisible. So that was the ring. So in short, there was this huge battle between Sauron and the people, and he was finally defeated, and his ring finger was cut off, and he was defeated and sent away. And King Isildur took the ring. Rather than destroying it, remember it makes you addicted to its power, he used the ring, and eventually he lost it and was killed, and the end of the Second Age. So that's all of the first books. Now, between the Second and the Third Age, something happened. You had a character named Sméagol. He was a little short person. Have you ever heard of the Hobbits? He was like the Hobbits. Sméagol, all of a sudden, he found the ring. And he wanted the ring. It was his birthday. So he killed the person he was with. And then he caused all this mischief in his village. Eventually, he wanted to be alone and was driven out, and he went and lived in the Lonely Mountain. Did you notice that this ring, sin, makes you want to be alone? No one wants to be seen in their sin. So that's why invisibility is so important. When it comes to sin, they don't want to be seen. So this is where the Hobbit begins. So we are now into the next part of the story. Gandalf shows up, talks to Bilbo, the dwarves show up, they sing and they dance. You have this hobbit in the Shire. He doesn't like any adventure, and eventually he goes off with the dwarves. They have this wonderful adventure going through everything, going to the Lonely Mountain. They get his treasure. He encounters a creature called Gollum. Sméagol with his ring under the mountain becomes known as Gollum. And he takes the ring, steals it. Now here's one of the funny things. When he keeps it a secret, doesn't want anyone to know about the ring. And when he does finally tell someone about the ring, he says, I won it in a game. Nope, didn't steal it. So even there, you can see it playing on Bilbo's ethical side. So after that, he comes back to the Shire, and we are now to the Lord of the Rings. We're almost done with we're getting close to the end of our survey. I hope that it's making sense a little bit. Again, we begin in the Shire. We have the hobbits, simple life, good food, good people, good drink. They like to dance, eat, enjoy fun, and watching their gardens. The ring is still there. And Gandalf has some ideas about the ring. Eventually, Frodo and his hobbit friends are forced to flee with the ring. Samwise, Pippin, and Merry, they leave the Shire. They're hunted by 9 riders. You remember the 9 riders? They're the ones who own the rings. They never died. However, they weren't really alive either. They were wraiths. So they had those rings. And so they were being hunted by those kings. So, after lots of adventure, after finding a ranger named Strider, eventually they learned his name was Aragorn, and Frodo was wounded by one of the ring wraiths. They end up in Rivendell, the elf city of the elf king Elrond. That's when Gandalf explains what the ring is really, what it really is. And they have to make a decision what to do with the ring. They could hide the ring, throw it in the ocean, you'll never see it again, or keep it in one of the elven villages. But they know the ring has a power of its own, it will be found. So that won't work. So then they think, okay, maybe we can use the ring. Yeah. This will give us power. Maybe it'll give us enough power to destroy the Dark Lord. If Gandalf, the wizard, takes it, yeah, maybe. No, that wouldn't work either. So they finally decide to destroy it. And the only way to destroy the ring is to bring it to Mount Doom, to the volcano where it was forged, and drop it into the lava into Mount Doom. That's their decision. Frodo volunteers to do this. He takes with him Aragorn, the king, Gimli the dwarf, Legolas the elf, Boromir from Gondor, Gandalf the Grey, the wizard, and 3 hobbit friends, Sam, Merry, and Pippin. And this group is called the Fellowship of the Ring. Ooh, I forgot. I probably should tell you what that's about before I put that up. That's the Fellowship of the Ring. They have lots of different adventures, and I'm not going to explain them. But one of the adventures is they go into Moria under a mountain, and Gandalf is confronted by a Balrog. Remember I said a Balrog was a Maya, an angel who takes on form, and sort of like a devil. So that's what a Balrog looks like. Then after that, they get by that. Gandalf fights the Balrog, is killed apparently, and that's when they get out of the other side of the mountain and go to the elven kingdom of Lothlorien, where Galadriel is queen. And when they leave there, they're given 7 gifts to help them on their journey. Oh, 7 gifts to help you on the journey. Oh, that's what sacraments are, aren't they? There's 7 gifts that help you on the journey. And that's what Christ did. They help us on our pilgrim journey to heaven. That's what sacraments are. They're gifts to help you with grace. One of the gifts is actually lembas. Lembas is food that nourishes you and fills you with strength and goodness and helps you to go on. Lembas is food for the journey. You can't get a clear reference to the Eucharist, which we also call food for the journey. Tolkien's favorite sacrament, and his very spirituality was so Eucharistic based, you can't help but seeing that reference. Okay, after that point, the fellowship is broken. Frodo says, I'm going to destroy all their lives. I need to sneak away alone. He sneaks away to go off to Mordor to destroy the ring by himself. His friend Samwise comes with him, and they go that direction. The other people of Boromir tried to steal the ring, and then the orcs attacked. Orcs are the negative characters in this world, and they attack. And all of a sudden, with that, Boromir is killed defending 2 of the other hobbits, and then they're dragged off in slavery. And while they're being taken off, Legolas, Gimli, and Aragorn follow along. And their whole story is they go and they're freed, the 2 hobbits, and it was their job to muster the armies of Rohan, to free King Theoden from the bondage of Saruman. The Ents are brought in, the tree people who are very involved, and then from there, they with all those troops, some of them go to Gondor and start their armies. So the whole thing is they're organizing the armies against Sauron's, and they're going to get beaten, trounced horribly. But at the same time, Frodo and Sam continue to Mount Doom. They encounter spiders and orcs, but mostly they're fighting against the evil of the ring itself. Eventually they encounter Gollum because he wants his ring back. His ring is precious, but when they finally get to the Mount Doom, Frodo is right there with the ring. All he has to do is throw it in. And he said, and all of a sudden the addiction to the ring takes hold. He puts it on, claims the ring for himself, and apparently fails. And that's when Gollum wants his ring, dives on Frodo, bites off his finger, takes the ring, and it stumbles and plunges into Mount Doom. The ring is destroyed. With that, Sauron is destroyed. This is the spoiler that I was talking about. the ring is destroyed, Sauron is destroyed, Aragorn comes back and is made king of Gondor, and then they all go back to the Shire, and they clean out the Shire because Saruman, the person, went to the Shire. Okay, that's the summary. I hope that for those of you who have read everything, you'd probably include a whole bunch more, but I could just spend hours just telling about the summary. I probably did 5,000 pages worth of literature right there. So next, that was Mount Doom, and then we move to who is J.R.R. Tolkien? John Ronald Reuel Tolkien, J.R.R. Tolkien, was born in 1892 in South Africa. When he was 3 years old, his mother Mabel said, let's go back to England and take a trip to visit family. While they were back in England, his father died. So his mother is in England, no income, no money. She was forced to move in with her family and lived on the outside of Birmingham, the village of Birmingham. And his mother taught him at home. It was basically the first part of his life homeschooled. She taught him English, Latin, and botany. Those are the three things. So with botany, he loved plants. He would spend all his time hiking out in the mountains, and you will see his love in his descriptions that he does throughout the book. His descriptions of forests, his descriptions of plants and flowers and food and hiking and mountains are just stunning. So you can just see that in his very life. Okay, his mother taught him at home. Then, in 1900, Mabel, who was Baptist, she wasn't Catholic, she decided to become Catholic. She had this massive conversion experience. But her whole family, being Catholic, kicked her out of the family, completely abandoned her, and left her completely without any money whatsoever. So she showed up on the priest's doorstep, and they helped her a lot. She worked as much as she could, and when she was 12, when Tolkien was 12, she died from complications of her hard work and her diabetes. This is what Tolkien wrote of that moment. My own dear mother was a martyr. Indeed, it is not everybody that God grants so easy a way of his great gifts as he did to Hilary and myself. Hilary was his brother. Giving us a mother who killed herself with labor and trouble to ensure us keeping the faith. In other words, I have a mother that'll do anything for me. Wasn't that wonderful? Okay, prior to her death, Mabel Tolkien had arranged with Father Francis Xavier Morgan from the Birmingham Oratory to take her children in and raise them as good Catholics. In other words, Tolkien was raised by priests. Now, you talked about the atmosphere he grew up in, the English town. They said the anti-Catholic fervor was horrible. They talked more about Bloody Mary and the evil Catholic queen than about Mary and Mother of Jesus. And he said he was constantly called you Romanist. That was one of the things they called Catholics back then. You're a Romanist. But because of those attacks, Tolkien said his faith got stronger and stronger, defending the faith. So with that, remember, Tolkien was raised by priests. Daily Mass, Liturgy of the Hours. It's not the fact that he knew everything about the church, but his entire worldview and understanding of reality was Catholic. That all of creation was, you could see it sacramentally. He understood love and sacrifice. He knew that we were created for one another and for friendship. He understood the idea of divine providence, how God guides things. And this is the view of the world that comes out in The Lord of the Rings. He wrote a letter to a friend once, and I love this quote. He wrote, "The Lord of the Rings is, of course, a fundamentally religious and Catholic work. Unconsciously at first, but consciously in its revision. That is why I have not put in or I have cut out practically all references to anything like religion, cults, practices in the imaginary world. For the religious element is absorbed into the story and the symbolism. So when you read Lord of the Rings, there will be no religious ceremonies, no explicit religion in the people. What comes out as Catholic is the worldview. Again, the sacramental understanding of nature and the world, the view of creation, the view of good and evil, the view of morality with its moral absolutes, how virtues work, the need for mercy, divine providence. It is all of those things. It's not Catholic teaching as in, here is what the church teaches. But it is creating a Catholic world in all its Catholic reality. Okay, the next part of his life that was very important. 16 years old. He met Edith Bratt, who was 19. He fell in love. 16 years old, fell in love. They spent all their time in tea houses talking and having tea. His grades tanked at school. And all he wanted to do at age 16 was to marry Edith. Now remember, he lived with a priest. Father Francis said, "You are too young, she is too old, and she is not Catholic." And the priest forbade him from seeing her ever again until he was 21 years old. Dilemma. What do you do when you're 16 and you're ordered by the person raising you that you cannot speak with the person you love until you're 21? He went out and saw her and said, "Edith, I love you, I'm going to marry you, but out of filial obedience to Father Francis, I will never speak to you again till I'm 21 years old, which is 5 years from now." Boom, last time they spoke. The night of his 21st birthday, he got out his pen and paper and wrote Edith a letter. "Dear Edith," and then he proposed to her. She got the letter. She was engaged to someone else. Tolkien immediately ran to her. They spent an entire night talking together. She contacted the person she was engaged to, called off the engagement, and then was engaged to Tolkien. And they were engaged at 21, and eventually they were married. And she became the love of his life. This love story is so perfect. Why? Because all of the language of love that was done for Beren and Luthien, he says was the love between him and Edith. Matter of fact, when she finally died, Edith married Tolkien Luthien. He had that written on her tombstone. And then when he died, he was buried in the same place, and they wrote Beren. Right up till the moment they died, that story of Luthien and Beren went with them. It is a love story. The next influential part of his life was his military experience. He entered